Hi, hello, namaste. My name is Parth and this is Dhvani. Thank you for taking out time for listening to this honest effort that I'm putting forth. This is my very first experience producing a podcast. So there would be some errors and experiments and definitely a lot of learning that would be happening on the way. So thank you again, dear listener, for supporting me and this podcast. I also want to mention that a lot of people whom I'm going to name in the end of this episode have helped me starting this idea. And I'm very grateful to each one of them for their love and support. I also wish to collaborate with more people as we progress. So let me quickly start off by telling you some of my plans for this podcast. Also, a small disclaimer here, I would be using the word podcast a lot in this particular episode. So just wanted to give all of you a little heads up before we begin. Okay, so the first thing is the format. There would be episodes both in Hindi and English separately because these are the two languages that I'm most confident in. The English ones would be purely in English and the Hindi ones would be a mix, just like English, which is how many of us Hindi speakers talk nowadays. Episodes would be dropped every Wednesday in either of the languages if there's a possibility and if I'm able to pull it off myself in time. I would also be releasing the episode in the other language on the same topic, possibly on the weekend. Listeners who are like me, the ones who can comprehend both the languages, I would request and encourage you to listen to both of them because I won't be doing something like Google Translate. So you might find something extra or interesting in either of them. Every alternate episode would be an interview with some guests discussing their experiences on a particular topic. I would also be putting up videos of these interviews, so there would be a YouTube channel eventually where one can watch these discussions, and that would be interesting as well. And that is the very simple format and schedule that I will try my best to follow. Since I'm doing most of the work alone right now without any professional experience, I might take a little more time to get into this groove. I want to apologize in advance for all the mistakes that might happen during this journey and while I am learning all this. So that was about the format. Now let me tell you something about this concept and the word Dhvani itself. Dhvani is a Sanskrit word that means sound. It's very interesting that in most of the Indian languages, this word is used as it is. Now, depending on the context, it can sometimes have a negative connotation like noise, or it can also convey something good and beautiful like music. The idea here is to try and separate some relevant information from all the clutter and mess that we deal with today, especially in this overflow of data and algorithms that is everywhere. The goal is to talk about observations, thoughts, insecurities, experiences in a very honest and unfiltered manner on this somewhat new, yet in many ways a very familiar medium, which is sound. For now, I'm very open to discuss anything and everything, at least things that I am curious about or have some experiences with myself. And your feedback would be very important to know if you find them interesting as well, or boring, or helpful, or anything. A very good friend of mine suggested that I should call this season Socho. For the people who don't speak Hindi, Soch means thought in Hindi. Socho is when you ask or request somebody to think. So hopefully, whatever we discuss in this season in this podcast will encourage you to think about these topics if you haven't already. And therefore, I would request you to please write to me your thoughts, complaints, feedbacks, suggestions, whatever you feel like. All the details will be shared in the show notes and towards the end of this episode. Now, since we've got this format and schedule of this podcast out of the way, let's move on to the topic that I wanted to kick off this season, which is podcasts itself. How I look at them and why I think sound plays an important role in all of our lives. So I belong to the generation that grew up with a radio in the house. For my household, radio was and even today is a very important part. As far back as my memory goes, I remember waking up to the sound of bhajans. which is religious or spiritual music in Indian languages, on FM radio. And I think subconsciously that eventually got me interested in music and prepared me to listen to people talking. Now today people tell me that the only time they listen to a radio is when they are in the car. And frankly, I feel sad. See, I don't need to highlight this, that we are innately fond of sound in so many different ways, right? We are already very familiarized by the idea of listening to sounds in different ways that have a potential to entertain us, educate us, make us think, keep us updated, and so many other things like that. And a podcast is nothing but, let's say, an on-demand radio. Now, the second point is, which I will again tell you from my own experiences, when I compare watching an informative video on YouTube to listening to a similar thing in the form of a podcast, the amount of attention and effort required in case of a podcast is lesser. I'll tell you why. To watch a video, you need to engage both of your visual and audio senses to focus, right? And the same goes for a book if you think about it. No wonder ideas like Audible are growing rapidly today. Now, the next big question that I often get is when to listen to a podcast. Because let's say you cannot directly replace a YouTube video with a podcast, because it is sort of boring to just listen and not do anything else. And same goes for music. A friend of mine says that she can only picture herself listening to a podcast in a long bus or train journey, and that's it. Now, that is definitely a problem for people like me who are trying to get into this world of podcasting. But let me give you how I incorporate podcasts in my daily life. For me, podcast is associated with kitchen, cooking, doing dishes, and evening walks. And trust me on this, from the moment I have started listening to podcasts while cooking or doing dishes, now I sometimes look forward to do my dishes. And this is precisely why I believe in this idea, that how beautifully it converts such boring, mundane activities into something that you start enjoying all of a sudden. This is called by association, by the way, which I would be talking more about in the future. So in the last 6 years that I've been listening to podcasts, especially in the last 2 years, I discovered this app called Stitcher. And from that point on, I have been consuming audio content like crazy. This episode is not sponsored by them, but I genuinely think because of Stitcher, I got a lot more into podcasts. And I'm very sure the big ones like Apple Podcasts, which is apparently the biggest podcast directory on the tube, Google Podcasts, and now Spotify are doing the same job or even better job than Stitcher. So that were the things that I wanted to discuss today in this first episode. Now, I request you to please tell me if you are already familiar to this world of podcasts. If yes, how frequently do you listen to podcasts? And most importantly, when do you choose to listen to podcasts? You know what would be amazing? If you can send me voice notes telling me this information, because I can put those voice notes directly in my podcast here. And that would be nice, no? To do that, you can contact me through my Facebook profile, which is facebook.com/chauhan.parth. That is CHAUHAN.PARTH. Let me also know if you prefer other mediums to communicate your feedback, suggestions, and expectations. As I mentioned previously, I'm open to ideas right now, and it would be awesome if you can be more than a listener. Thank you for sticking around till the end. This podcast has been produced and hosted by me, Parth Chauhan. I'm currently based in the Netherlands in a town called Maastricht. The amazing theme music of this podcast was composed by Q-Tip I Honey Bunch, who also works under a collective called Own Tempo Limited. The branding for Dhvani was done by Soumya Garg, facilitated by Shivangi Garg. Sonata Dev is the one who gave the name Socho for this season, and she also helped me a lot in conceptualizing a lot of things. I was also supported by my friend and idea partner Abhimanyu Parijat, my best friend Naman Agarwal, and my brother Shaurivardhan Singh. If you want to contact these people and artists, you can write to me at info@dhvani.co.in and log on to dhvani.co.in/podcasts to find more information. You can also do a Google search with the phrase Dhvani podcast and you will get what you need. If you have an idea that you would like to discuss on this podcast, or maybe if you want to work with me in any way, design, writing, music, sound, editing, or anything else, you can contact me through my Instagram handle, which is par.cha, par.cha, or my Facebook profile, which is chauhan.parth. All these details are in the show notes and on the website as well. This podcast is available on all major platforms, including Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, or any other platform that you choose for your podcasts. I would request you to please subscribe and follow this podcast, and also to rate it with possibly good ratings if you like what you hear. Your support is very much required. Thank you, and hope to see you in the next one. Bye.